I mean, I'm generally a glass half full person. And so anything to encourage investment into the economy, I think, is absolutely necessary into the UK. We know what the statistics are. We know that the pillar investors, pension funds, insurance companies, and endowments have been underinvested in the country. And, just as a statistic, pension funds in 1992 had 32% of their assets under management invested into the UK economy. Today, that number is around 1.6 to 1.9%. I mean, that is absurd. And it's particularly problematic because if the local pillar investors are not investing in the UK economy, it's going to be even harder to attract foreign direct investment. So I think it's not helpful to have an ever more negative narrative. However, I do understand that that we have to be realistic, and there are challenges, no doubt about it. But I think it's a very fine balance between spooking investors and even not just outside investors, spooking local investors and citizens to decide to leave under the threat of more higher taxes and a very aggressive sort of messaging, which everybody understands that there's absolutely a reset that's required. And I think, but that there is that balance of making things sound so negative, and on the one hand, and not really being able to attract the investments needed for the growth.
Yeah, absolutely. Labour poured effort into convincing the global investor, global bond markets that the UK was going to be turning over a new leaf. They were talking about, a two-term government and so on. But already Bloomberg has reported on issues around, non-doms leaving. Do you see international investors leaving? Is the Labour government attracting more, or are they actually on the way out?
I think it's too soon to say. I mean, my personal sense is that there's a lot of uncertainty between now and the budget on October 30th in the UK. We have the US election. We've got rate cuts potentially coming. There's definitely been a wall of money sitting and waiting to see what happens. And certainly the narrative around stability in the political environment in the UK is net value positive. And so I think there are a lot of great things that are being said around the need for productivity gains. I think the Prime Minister yesterday was talking about the NHS in particular. No need for more taxes. It just needs more productivity, more efficiencies. I think all that's great news. But the budget is really going to be critical. I've been told by some friends that they might just be spooking us a little bit too much, and it might be not as bad. But we have to wait and see.
You're talking about the efficiencies line that came out from the speech from Keir Starmer yesterday. That was not in the headlines, and that's part of the problem. The headlines were that this is an NHS in crisis. The headlines were in the lead up, of course, into the budget, it's going to be painful, and Rachel Reeves has talked about, the Prime Minister's talked about, yes, there are some solutions they nod to, but that's not what people are thinking about. People are thinking about pain and misery and tax hikes and continuing pressure on our public services. Is this a government that's talking down this country?
Well, again, I think it's early days. It is early innings. I mean, on the NHS, I thought to myself, hearing the sort of my fellow peer, Lord Darcy's report, well, what was new there? And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. Obviously, more information, updating information is critical. But the fact of the matter is everybody feels that it knows that for several decades, the NHS is underfunded. People are overworked. The cost for patients and treatment is not competitive. And we know we have about the long list, particularly after the pandemic. And so in that sense, there's no new news. But I do think emphasizing the importance of productivity gains, not just on the top side for providing and delivering services to more people at a faster, better clip, but also cutting back the costs, which are just unsustainable over the long term with the threat of diabetes and obesity concerns, issues around aging populations, etc. And so I fundamentally think, I want to hear more. I want to know how we're going to deploy AI and new technologies to reduce those costs and deliver benefits to the average citizen.
Okay, what do you think will be the fallout from the budget? What would be the worst potential item in the budget? What would have the biggest impact? I mean, in terms of the talks around taxation, it does affect, the wealthiest. The talk is around kind of wealth taxation, capital gains tax, inheritance tax changes. Yeah. What will be the most off-putting to international investors that Britain needs?
Well, I know people think capital gains is the sort of buzz sort of phrase in the press, but the truth is, everyone is promising changes in the capital gains. I mean, the United States, both camps, the Democrats and the Republicans are talking about changes to capital gains. And so I don't think it's a direction question. It's much more of a sort of magnitude question. And again, it's hard for me to calibrate what that will look like until we've actually seen what they say. And I think nobody is not expecting some tax increases. I think many people would be surprised if there are not some changes around spending. I mean, I know that's not sort of been a big issue or debated here, but certainly taxes are going up. We know, I'm pretty sure the market's expecting that. The question is how big and what are the knock-on effects of that. I think anything that deters further investment in the country is problematic, and that's what the market will be looking for. And obviously, there's also talk about the Chancellor of the Exchequer looking at debt ceilings, thinking about that, and it is a balancing act, no doubt about it. And all public policymakers in developed and developing countries, but particularly developed countries, are facing a challenge. We've had a pandemic, we've had a financial crisis, we're in the middle of 2 wars. It is going to be a very challenging period, but we'd better look at the long term and not just in the immediacy of trying to get the balance right.